Hi everyone and welcome. As we approach the end of 2025, it's time to look back at a truly historic year for Canada's express entry system. I'm Eve, a licensed immigration consultant, and today I'm breaking down the numbers, the trends, and what they mean for you in 2026. The headline: IRCC issued over 118,000 ITAs this year. But the real story isn't just the volume, it's the dramatic shift in strategy. If you're planning an express entry application, understanding this shift is absolutely critical. So let's start with the big picture. In 2025, two categories absolutely dominated the invitations. Together, they accounted for a staggering 73% of all ITAs issued. First, the Canadian Experience Class, or CEC, made up 32.8% of invitations. That's over 38,000 people. This continues a clear trend. IRCC is prioritizing candidates who are already here, who have Canadian work experience, and who are transitioning from temporary to permanent status. It's a pathway built on proving yourself in the Canadian economy. But the biggest story of 2025 was the French language proficiency category. It wasn't just a category, it was the category, issuing 40.6% of all ITAs. That's nearly 48,000 invitations dedicated to candidates with strong French skills. This isn't an accident. It's a direct, powerful commitment from the government to boost Francophone immigration outside Quebec. And here's the most important part for candidates. The CRS scores in these French draws were significantly lower. The average cutoff was 422 compared to 530 for CEC. That's a massive 100-point advantage for bilingual candidates. It was by far the most accessible pathway this year. Now, beyond French and CEC, we saw targeted draws for specific occupations. The healthcare category was a major focus with 14.4% of all ITAs. Canada is actively recruiting doctors, nurses, and care workers to address critical shortages, and the CRS scores for these draws reflected that need, averaging around 470. Other categories like education and the skilled trades had smaller, more targeted allocations. This tells us IRCC is using a scalpel, not just a hammer, carefully selecting for specific labor market gaps. And we can't forget the Provincial Nominee Program, or PNP. While it made up 8.2% of ITAs, it is in a league of its own. PNP draws had by far the highest CRS scores, averaging 757, but don't let that scare you. That high score is almost entirely due to the 600-point nomination bonus. What this really shows is that if your core CRS score is lower, a provincial nomination remains the golden ticket. It's a regional pathway that gives provinces a say in who settles there. Looking at the year, a couple of key trends jump out. First, the consistency of CEC. The CRS score range was very tight, between 515 and 547. This tells us the pool of qualified in-Canada candidates is deep and stable. If you're here on a work permit, aiming for a score in that low to mid 520s range has been and likely will remain a key target. Second, the sheer volume for French. 10 dedicated draws, some issuing up to 7,500 ITAs at a time. The message couldn't be clearer. Learning French is one of the most impactful things you can do to boost your immigration chances. And third, the incredible December rush. In just the first 17 days of December, IRCC issued nearly 25,000 ITAs. That's over 20% of the entire year's total, packed into a few weeks. We saw huge draws for French and the largest CEC draw of the year. This year-end sprint suggests Maybe IRCC was working hard to meet targets and it created a flurry of opportunity for those in the pool. So, what does all this mean for 2026? The data from this year gives us some very clear signals about IRCC's direction. Here's my analysis and a strategic advice for you. First, the French language emphasis will not just continue. It's a cornerstone of the strategy. The government has public targets to increase Francophone immigration. In 2025, this category blew past just being a priority to become the single largest source of ITAs. For 2026, we should expect this to be sustained with potentially over 45,000 invitations again. My advice remains, if you have any foundation in French, investing in lessons and taking a certified test is arguably the most powerful strategic move you can make. The CRS advantage is simply too significant to ignore. Second, expect stability in the CEC or Canadian Experience class. The CRS range was remarkably consistent in 2025, between 515 and 547. This reflects a stable, predictable in-Canada labor market. For 2026, I anticipate this stability to continue, with scores likely hovering in that 520 to 535 range. Your focus as a CEC candidate should be on locking in a score within that band. Third, be prepared for potential expanded occupation categories. New categories may emerge in 2026 like physicians, research professionals, or national security specialists. While healthcare, education, and trades were the focus this year, the system is designed to be adaptive. My advice is to stay informed. If you work in a specialized, in-demand field, monitor IRCC announcements closely as a new dedicated draw category could open a direct pathway for you. Fourth, watch for potential PNP growth. Provincial allocations might increase if federal targets require better regional distribution. While PNP draws had high CRS scores, remember that due to the 600 points bonus, the core takeaway is that provincial nomination remains the ultimate trump card. If your federal score isn't competitive, researching and targeting provincial nominee programs should be a primary part of your strategy. This pathway might become even more important. Fifth, and this is critical, understand the context of reduced overall volume. While 118,000 ITAs is a substantial number, it's part of a calibrated reduction. This means competition within each category is very tight. You can't just be qualified. You need to be strategically positioned. Proactive skills development, especially in French, meticulous profile preparation are non-negotiable. 2025 was the year Express Entry moved from general ranking system to a targeted selection tool. The priorities are clear: French, Canadian experience, and filling specific job vacancies. As we head to 2026, your plan must reflect that. The expectations are set: sustained French focus, stable CEC scores, new occupational categories on the horizon, and a continued role for the PNP. Your job is to listen, assess your profile against these priorities, and ask, can I leverage French? Am I maximizing my Canadian experience score? Does my occupation have or might it get a dedicated category? Have I fully researched every province that might want my skills? The landscape is detailed, but that means more targeted opportunities. With a strategic approach, you can navigate it successfully. If you have questions about your specific situation, feel free to reach out. Wishing you all the best for a successful 2026.